Chicago. A smart boy walked home from school and got into a car he recognized. Two college men said they'd give him a lift. By night, a ransom note called him alive. By morning, a worker found a body in a culvert near the Indiana line. On the ground beside it, a pair of rare eyeglasses. So I'll start with who they were and where this began. Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb were wealthy University of Chicago students from Kenwood Hyde Park. Neighbors in fine houses, boys who read law books for fun and talked about being above rules. Leopold collected birds and languages. Loeb collected mystery novels and attention. They were 19 and 18 with drivers, allowances, and vault-quiet libraries at home where ideas could get too big and too wrong. Bobby Franks was 14, a bright, polite kid from the same neighborhood, a cousin of Loeb's. He played ball, kept score, and walked familiar sidewalks after school. Spring 1924 put green back on the trees. Streetcars rattled. The lake breeze made collars flap. Parents trusted the blocks between school and supper. A boy could take a shortcut and be home in minutes. Leopold and Loeb had a plan they called perfect: kidnap a boy for ransom, prove to themselves they were smarter than the city, then vanish into ordinary life. They rehearsed aliases, rented a car under a false name, bought a chisel, mixed acid to blur identity, and typed a ransom letter on a portable typewriter they kept hidden. To the outside world, they were clever students. Behind that picture, something dark waited. But behind this everyday routine, something felt off. Two boys talking about supermen and thrill, cashing small thefts like practice rounds, and taking long drives with no honest destination. The first sign was small, but it stayed with me. A rented Willys-Knight seen circling the school blocks. A typewritten letter dated before any kidnapping was reported. A chisel wrapped just so in cloth in the glove box. The plan needed privacy, speed, and a boy who knew at least one of them. Someone who'd accept a ride without a fight. May 21, 1924 would be the date they chose. They talked in low voices at lunch counters, tested routes down 55th Street, out toward the Calumet area where the land dips and marshes drink sound. They practiced fake names, George Johnson for ransom calls, and picked a bank to prepare $10,000 in marked bills for a family too frightened to check serial numbers. They even planned the phone call script, pause by pause. Investigators would later say one detail didn't fit. A plan so perfect still left room for human error. Schedules, a driver who noticed times, and one pair of eyeglasses with a rare hinge. Those small things matter later. That brings me to the hours before everything changed. May 21, 1924, late afternoon. School let out. Bobby Franks started the short walk home along Ellis Avenue. The rented car rolled to the curb. Loeb smiled. Leopold leaned over the wheel. A cousin offering a ride after school is not a stranger. Bobby got in. From 4:30 to 6 p.m., the city looked normal. Shop windows, streetcars, men in hats reading paper headlines. But inside that car, a script unfolded. A conversation to relax the boy. A turn away from home. A blow with a chisel. A gag that ended breath. A panic that felt like control to boys who mistook cruelty for genius. They drove out toward the state line as dusk sat down on the rooftops. Surroundings later entered the record. A marshy area near Wolf Lake. A culvert along a rail embankment. A place where passing freight can hide any noise. One routine step didn't happen that day. Mercy. Instead, there was acid to the face and body to muddle identity. A body shoved into a culvert, and a pair of horn-rimmed glasses that slipped into weeds and stayed. And then came the moment the quiet broke. By evening, a typewritten ransom letter reached the Franks' home, cold and precise. Do not call police. Wait for instructions. Your boy is safe. The phone rang with a voice calling itself George Johnson. The family followed the script enough to keep hope alive. At first, everything looked like a kidnapping that could still end with a door opening and a boy stepping in. But early morning changed the case forever. A worker near 118th Street found a body in a culvert. Police and reporters arrived. The description struck like iron. It was Bobby Franks. The ransom plot died on contact with daylight. If you pause the clock right here, the next choice changes everything. Pretend the ransom can still work, or pivot to a murder investigation with every hour counting. Because the next minute is when it happens. Because the next minute is when it happens. The ransom story collapses into a homicide. Detectives retraced Bobby's last steps, pulled call logs, and studied the letter for quirks, spelling, line breaks, the portable typewriter's fingerprint. They walked the culvert banks and marked the acid burns in fabric while keeping the tone dry and documentary. No theatrics, just facts. At first everything looked like two ghosts in a car, hard to catch, until one detail wasn't normal. A pair of eyeglasses with an unusual patented hinge. Only a few pairs had been sold in Chicago. That turned a field into a list of names. I leaned closer and saw the first clear clue. The glasses. Sales records narrowed the owners. One name on the list, Nathan Leopold. He explained quickly. He birdwatched there. He must have dropped them sometime. Detectives made a note and kept going. They checked alibis. Leopold and Loeb said they'd been out in Nathan's car that evening with girls whose names they couldn't quite fix. A chauffeur said he'd been repairing Leopold's car at that exact time. It couldn't have been driven. The clue raised a question no one could answer. Which car then? Then someone said, "Check the typewriter." The ransom note's typeface had quirks. If they could find the machine, they'd find the authors. Then someone said, "Check the typewriter." We did. Then someone said, "Check the typewriter." We did. Friends mentioned a portable that Leopold and Loeb used for school notes and letters. Searches led to Jackson Park, where the typewriter was later recovered after being ditched. Its type matched the ransom note. Meanwhile, the rented Willys-Knight still carried stains and fibers that didn't love light. Two facts can't both be true, unless there's a third thing we missed. Fact A. The boys claimed an alibi that used Leopold's personal car. Fact B. The chauffeur swore that car wasn't available. Third, a rental car exists, and its paperwork tells time. Detectives followed rental records, found aliases, traced routes. The evidence wove itself like careful string. Glasses, name, typewriter, note, car, route. That's when the room went silent, and we realized what we were standing in. That's when the room went silent, and we realized what we were standing in. Not a puzzle, but a confession waiting to happen. Under hours of questioning, Assistant State's Attorney Robert Crow pressing, Detective Sergeant Michael Hughes steady, Loeb cracked first, then Leopold. Each tried to make the other the killer, but together they painted the same ride, the same chisel, the same culvert. The words sounded cool in their mouths. On paper, they were warm enough to burn. We thought we knew what smart boys do with their smarts. We didn't. They used them to stage a murder, then wrote letters to prove they were clever. By the time the police arrived, the real work was just starting. Build a case without the ransom theater, lock in physical links, and prepare for a courtroom where wealth and reputation would try to bend the air. By the time the police arrived, the real work was just starting. Evidence teams cataloged the glasses, the rented car, the typewriter, the chisel, the acid bottles, the maps. Phone records and letter drafts went into envelopes with neat labels. The timeline was written hour by hour. Neighbors and classmates were interviewed. Some details were messy. Confessions that flipped blame, rumors about motives that read like novels. But the spine of the case stayed straight. The press called it a thrill killing. The city called it unthinkable. Detectives kept their tone flat. Bobby Franks was dead. Leopold and Loeb had planned and done it. The rest was sentencing. One procedure wasn't perfect. Public frenzy made privacy hard, but the core facts were sealed tight. Then the focus shifted to the courtroom and to whether they'd hang. The focus shifted to the courtroom and to whether they'd hang. The defense hired Clarence Darrow, the most famous lawyer in America, who changed the fight from whodunit to what penalty. He gave a 12-hour plea against the death penalty, talking about youth, environment, and the danger of vengeance dressed as justice. The prosecution showed premeditation. Maps, purchases, the typed letter before the crime, the car, the confession. At first it looked simple. Crime this deliberate meets the rope. But investigators, and the judge, soon saw something that didn't neatly fit old formulas. Two defendants, under 21, confessing, with mountainous evidence and a city on fire with anger. And that discovery forced a new look at punishment versus proof. In September 1924, Judge John R. Caverly delivered his decision. No death. Instead, life imprisonment for murder, plus 99 years for kidnapping, for both. He cited their youth, the confessions, and a belief that state killing wouldn't teach what people hoped it would. The city split. The law stood. The case was solved in guilt, argued forever in sentence. Outside court, the evidence kept its quiet voice. The hinge on the glasses, the typed letters, the rental papers, the culvert mud. These are the boring things that end big stories. Then, just when it cooled down, time wrote the last footnotes. Richard Loeb was killed in prison in 1936 during an attack by another inmate. Nathan Leopold served decades, studied, worked in prison laboratories, and was paroled in 1958, later moving to Puerto Rico to work in medical services. He died in 1971. It answered one question and created three more. Did the sentence fit? Did the city learn anything? How do we measure a life after a name like this? The thrill they bragged about was a hollow word that never once mentioned Bobby. The only measure that matters is Bobby Franks, a boy who should have walked home, eaten dinner, gone to sleep, and grown old. So we follow the trail to where the case stands now. The twist isn't a surprise suspect. It's the long echo, how two privileged students turned arrogance into murder, and how a judge chose life over rope in the face of a city demanding the opposite. Everyone thought the verdict was the end. Maybe it was the middle, because arguments about punishment and youth still use this case as a mirror. Which brings me to where the case stands tonight. Status: solved. Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb confessed and were convicted in 1924 for the kidnapping and murder of Bobby Franks. Sentence: life for murder, 99 years for kidnapping, both. Loeb died in prison, 1936. Leopold was paroled, 1958. Died 1971. The case is a landmark in forensic common sense. Rare eyeglasses, a typewriter match, rental car records, timeline contradictions. The boring pieces that close the walls. It's also a landmark in sentencing debate. Clarence Darrow's plea, Judge Caverly's decision, and a city learning that justice and revenge are not the same word. A quiet block in Kenwood still looks like any other, but anyone who knows the story walks it a little slower. Now your turn. What detail sealed it for you? The hinged glasses, the typewriter, the rental car, or the confessions that tried to trade blame back and forth? Did the sentence fit the crime, or did the judge make the right call in 1924? Tell me in the comments, and say if you want a part 2, where we unpack the ransom choreography and trace the minute-by-minute route from Ellis Avenue to the culvert. I'll keep the page open until the truth walks in.